20 years of sterile rooms and billion-dollar specialists left her entirely hollow. A custom titanium chair was her throne, her prison. Then came a mop bucket, cold water, and a tired man making minimum wage who noticed a single muscle twitch the world's most expensive neurologists completely ignored. Neon light bled through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the 64th floor, painting the mahogany desk in sharp, aggressive slashes of corporate blue. Vanessa sat motionless, her spine pressed into the molded carbon fiber backrest of her chair. It whirred, a faint, high-pitched mechanical whine that had been the soundtrack of her life for 2 decades. The leather smelled of chemical treatment and cold money. Below her waist, nothing. Just dead weight, wrapped in $6,000 wool trousers. 20 years ago, metal crumpled against concrete on an icy interstate. A drunk driver in a pickup truck crossed the median, turning her sleek sports car into a crushed accordion of glass and steel. Specialists in Geneva, Boston, and Tokyo had poked her legs with silver pins, mapped her nerves with cold, glowing screens, and spoken in hushed, expensive tones. Spinal cord contusion, severe nerve degradation, incomplete but permanent paraplegia. They billed her holding company millions to tell her she would never walk again. Over time, Vanessa stopped looking for a cure. She built an empire instead. Logistics, shipping, software. If she couldn't move, she would make the rest of the world move for her. She became ruthless. Empathy was a luxury she traded for control. When you cannot feel your own feet resting on the carpet, you find other ways to anchor yourself to the earth. For Vanessa, that anchor was power. She fired executives for typos. She bought rival companies just to dismantle them. She surrounded herself with people who were terrified of her because fear felt like respect, and respect was a decent substitute for pity. Her office was a temperature-controlled vacuum, 68 degrees, always. The air smelled of bitter espresso and the faint ozone tang of humming servers. She hated flowers. They rotted. She hated music. It distracted. The only rhythm she tolerated was the heavy ticking of the grandfather clock in the corner, a massive antique that commanded the room. It was 11:43 p.m. on a Tuesday. The building was hollowed out, abandoned by the daytime suits who scurried to their commuter trains hours ago. Vanessa stared at a quarterly earnings report, her vision blurring at the edges. Her lower back throbbed, a dull, relentless ache that the painkillers only managed to mute, never erase. Phantom pains shot down her right thigh occasionally, little electrical misfires from a broken switchboard. She dug her manicured nails into her thigh, pressing hard enough to leave deep half-moon indentations in the expensive wool. Nothing. Not a flicker of sensation. Just the squishy resistance of atrophying muscle. Lemon ammonia cut through the sterile air. Vanessa didn't look up from her tablet. The heavy wooden door pushed open, the hinges groaning slightly. A large yellow plastic barrel rolled over the threshold, its uneven wheels squeaking in a rhythm that grated against her teeth. Tyson didn't announce himself. He never did. He was a ghost in faded blue coveralls, haunting the executive floors after midnight. He carried the smell of industrial floor wax, old sweat, and cheap stale coffee. To Vanessa, he was part of the building's infrastructure, no different from the HVAC system or the automated blinds. He functioned, he cleaned, he vanished. He plunged a heavily stringed mop into the yellow bucket. The water sloshed, a heavy, wet sound. He wrung it out with a rusted metal lever. "You missed a spot by the credenza last night," Vanessa said. Her voice was flat, devoid of inflection. She didn't raise her eyes from the glowing screen. Tyson paused. The mop hovered an inch above the polished hardwood. He looked at her. Really looked at her. Most people avoided looking directly at Vanessa. They looked at her forehead, or the blinking lights on her chair's control panel. Tyson looked at her jaw, clamped tight with chronic pain, and the rigid, unnatural way her torso was strapped into the ergonomic bracing. "The wax needed 24 hours to cure," Tyson said. His voice was gravelly, quiet. He didn't sound apologetic. He sounded tired. "If I mopped it yesterday, it would have stripped the finish." Vanessa finally looked up. He was taller than she expected, though from her seated vantage point, everyone was tall. His hands were thick, knuckles wrapped in old pale scars. Calluses mapped the edges of his palms. He wasn't looking at the floor. He was looking at the intricate suspension system beneath her seat. "I don't pay you to manage the curing time of wax. I pay the cleaning contractor to ensure this office is immaculate," she snapped, irritation flaring. She hated being corrected. She hated the mundane reality of maintenance. Tyson didn't flinch. He just lowered the mop. "You pay the contractor. The contractor pays me $14 an hour. The wax does what it does." He turned his back to her, pushing the wet cotton across the floor in wide, methodical arcs. Vanessa's chest tightened. She reached for the joystick on her right armrest, intending to wheel herself out of the room to retreat to her private elevator. But her finger hovered over the plastic knob. She watched him. There was a deliberate economy to his movements. He didn't waste energy. Every sweep of the mop was calculated. He moved like a man who understood leverage, physics, and gravity. She noticed something else. A small shadow shifted beneath the heavy mahogany desk near the door. A pair of worn canvas sneakers poked out from beneath a grey wool blanket. "Is there a child under my assistant's desk?" Vanessa asked, her voice dropping an octave in disbelief. Tyson stopped. He leaned his weight against the wooden handle of the mop. He let out a slow, heavy breath through his nose. "His name is Lane. He's 7. The sitter cancelled. He's asleep. This is corporate headquarters, not a daycare." "It's midnight," Tyson replied, turning his head just enough to catch her eye. "He's quiet. He doesn't touch anything. He just sleeps. It's a liability. It's a necessity." The standoff hung in the air, thick with the smell of ammonia and ozone. Vanessa looked at the small sneakers. One of the shoelaces was frayed, knotted together in the middle. A profound, irritating tightness gripped her throat. It wasn't sympathy. It was an uncomfortable intrusion of reality into her carefully constructed vacuum. She swallowed hard. "If he breaks anything, it comes out of your contractor's fee." Tyson gave a single, curt nod. He went back to mopping. Vanessa went back to her tablet. But the silence in the room had shifted. It was no longer empty. There were 2 humans in it now, and one small sleeping boy. For the first time in a very long time, Vanessa felt the suffocating grip of her glass cage loosen just a fraction of an inch, letting in the cold, messy draft of the real world. Industrial bleach clings to the skin. It settles into the cuticles, embeds itself in the microscopic cracks of calloused hands, and becomes a permanent cologne. Tyson Fletcher didn't mind it anymore. It was better than the smell of motor oil and burnt transmission fluid that used to coat his hands back when he owned his own garage. That was 3 years ago, before the medical bills, before his wife's lungs decided to stop fighting the pneumonia, before the bank took the house, the shop, and the tools. Now he had Lane, and he had the night shift. Tyson dragged the heavy trash bag down the carpeted hallway, the plastic stretching and groaning over the friction. His lower back screamed, a hot wire of pain radiating down his left leg. He ignored it. Pain was just an indicator light on a dashboard. As long as the engine kept running, you covered the light with a piece of electrical tape and kept driving. He dumped the bag into the service elevator and hit the button for the 64th floor. He knew all about Vanessa Morgul. The night crew gossiped in the basement break room over stale donuts and burnt coffee. Ice Queen, half machine, half bitch. They said she fired a guy for wearing brown shoes with a black belt. They said her chair cost more than most people's mortgages, custom built by aerospace engineers. But Tyson didn't see an Ice Queen. When he looked at Vanessa, he saw a misaligned chassis. Years of diagnosing cracked engine blocks, twisted struts, and failing suspensions had rewired his brain. He didn't see people. He saw structures. He saw load-bearing points and stress fractures. He pushed the cleaning cart into her office. It was Thursday, 2 nights after the incident with Lane. Lane was currently asleep in the basement break room, tucked onto a ratty sofa, watched over by Maria, the security guard. Vanessa was there, of course. She never seemed to leave. The glow of the monitors illuminated her face, highlighting the deep, dark bags under her eyes. Tyson went to work. He sprayed the glass coffee table with Windex, wiping it down with a blue microfiber cloth. The squeak of the glass was sharp. He glanced at her from the corner of his eye. She was on a conference call, a headset strapped over her sleek blonde hair. She was eviscerating someone in London over supply chain delays. "I don't care if the port is striking," Vanessa hissed into the microphone, her hands gripping the armrests of her chair. "Route the freighters to Rotterdam and put the cargo on trains. You are bleeding my margin." Data, as she leaned forward, furious, transferring her upper body weight toward the desk, Tyson stopped wiping. He watched her right leg. Her foot was strapped onto a sleek titanium footplate. As her torso angled forward, compressing her abdomen, the angle of her pelvis shifted in the deep bucket seat of the wheelchair. The custom molding of the seat pushed hard against the base of her spine, and her right ankle twitched. It wasn't a spasm. It wasn't the violent, shuddering kick of a random neurological misfire. It was a subtle, distinct flexion. The toe tapped downward, pressing against the titanium plate. Tyson frowned. He dropped the cloth onto the cart and walked closer, pretending to check the wastebasket near her desk. "I want it done by morning," Vanessa snapped, and hit a button to end the call. She slumped back into the seat. The moment her weight settled back, the angle of her pelvis opened up. Her leg went completely dead again. "Empty the trash and leave," she said, rubbing her temples. Tyson stood there. He looked at the chair. It was a marvel of engineering, sure. Carbon fiber, brushed steel, memory foam. But it was designed for perfect posture. It was designed to cradle a broken spine in absolute, rigid safety. It kept her legs at a perfect 90-degree angle. "Who built that chair?" Tyson asked. Vanessa's head snapped up. Her eyes narrowed. "Excuse me?" "The chair," Tyson repeated, pointing a thick, scarred finger at the wheel assembly. Who built it? Medical supply company? A team of biomechanical engineers at MIT designed this chair, Vanessa said, her voice dripping with venom. Not that it is any of your business. Empty the trash. They built it wrong, Tyson said quietly. Vanessa froze. A laugh, dry, harsh, and utterly devoid of humor, scraped its way out of her throat. The janitor is critiquing my $200,000 medical equipment. That's rich. Tell me, Tyson, did you get your engineering degree before or after you learned how to mix floor wax? Tyson didn't bite back. He didn't get angry. He just looked at her with the same detached focus he used when diagnosing a blown head gasket. I know how weight sits, he said, taking a step closer. The smell of bleach and sweat invaded her pristine airspace. I know how tension works. That seat bucket, it tilts your pelvis back. It keeps your spine in a C curve. It looks comfortable, but it's pinching the bottom of your lumbar. I am paralyzed, you idiot, Vanessa spat, her hands trembling with sudden, volatile rage. The audacity of this man, the absolute gall. My spinal cord is damaged. My nerves are dead. It doesn't matter how my pelvis is tilted. I can't feel my legs. I haven't felt them in 20 years. When you leaned forward just now to yell at whoever was on the phone, Tyson said, his voice maddeningly calm. Your right foot pushed against the plate. Vanessa stared at him. The silence was deafening, save for the ticking of the grandfather clock. You're hallucinating, she whispered, but a cold sweat broke out on the back of her neck. I'm not, Tyson said. I fix things. I look at broken things all day. When you lean forward, you take the pressure off your lumbar spine. You change the angle of your hips. The nerve path opens up. Just a fraction. But it opens. Get out, Vanessa said, her voice shaking. Lady, I don't care about your money or your MIT engineers, Tyson said, leaning his heavy hands on her mahogany desk. Engineers build things to look good on paper. They don't account for how the human body sags when it's tired. That chair is a prison. I said, get out, Vanessa screamed, her hand slamming down on the desk. Tyson stood up straight. He grabbed the plastic trash bag, tied it off with a swift, violent motion, and tossed it into his cart. He didn't say another word. He turned the cart around and pushed it out the door, the uneven wheels squeaking all the way down the hall. Vanessa sat alone in the blue neon light. Her chest heaved. Her heart hammered against her ribs like a trapped bird. She looked down at her right foot, resting lifelessly on the titanium plate. Twitched. He said it twitched. She grabbed the armrests. She took a deep breath, squeezed her eyes shut, and threw her upper body weight forward, leaning aggressively over her knees. She strained, sending every ounce of her mental will down her spine, screaming at her dead legs to move. Nothing. Not a millimeter. She slumped back into the chair, tears of deep, agonizing humiliation stinging the corners of her eyes. She felt like a fool, a stupid, desperate fool who let a man with a mop get inside her head. She hit the joystick, spinning the chair around to face the window, staring out at the grid of city lights below. She would fire the cleaning company tomorrow. Friday night. The air in the office felt heavier, suffocating. Vanessa hadn't fired the cleaning company. She told herself it was because she didn't have the time to deal with procurement. In reality, she was terrified. Terrified that if she fired him, the invisible thread that had suddenly snapped taut between her reality and a horrifying, impossible hope would be severed forever. She had spent the last 48 hours secretly shifting in her chair, leaning forward, leaning back, twisting, straining until her neck muscles ached and a migraine pulsed behind her eyes. She had watched her feet like a hawk. They remained as dead as stone. At 1 a.m., the heavy oak door swung open. Tyson walked in. He didn't have his cart tonight. He wore his faded blue coveralls, but he carried a canvas tool bag. It clanked as he set it down on the expensive rug. Vanessa spun her chair around to face him. Her jaw was set. "What are you doing? Where is your mop?" Tyson didn't answer immediately. He unzipped the bag. The smell of sawdust, old leather, and 3-in-1 oil drifted up, rich and earthy. "I spent yesterday at the library," he said, pulling out a thick, leather-bound anatomy textbook. He tossed it onto her desk. It landed with a heavy thud, scattering a stack of printed spreadsheets. "Are you insane?" Vanessa demanded, her hands gripping the joystick, ready to hit the security panic button under her desk. "I read up on spinal contusions," Tyson continued, ignoring her outrage. He pulled out a piece of dark, sanded wood. It looked like a wedge, carved by hand, smooth and varnished. "Your medical file. I assume they told you the nerves were crushed, not severed." Vanessa froze. Her thumb hovered over the panic button. "How do you know that?" "Because if they were severed, your legs would be completely flaccid. Spasticity means the circuit is still closed, but the signal is scrambled, or blocked." Tyson walked around the desk, approaching her chair. "Stay away from me," Vanessa warned, her voice trembling. Tyson stopped 3 feet away. He looked her in the eyes. 20 years ago, you had surgery to stabilize your spine. They put rods in. They fused your lumbar. Yes. And then they put you in a chair. And you sat. And you sat. Your muscles shortened. Your hip flexors turned to concrete. That MIT chair is holding you in a posterior pelvic tilt to accommodate the fused rods. He pointed to the wooden wedge in his hand. It's keeping your sciatic and femoral nerve roots in a permanent state of compression against the scar tissue of your injury. The doctors looked at an MRI of a supine patient, Tyson interrupted, his voice rising, a raw, desperate edge to it. They looked at you lying flat in a tube. They didn't look at you sitting for 18 hours a day, fighting gravity. Vanessa stared at him. The absolute certainty in his eyes was terrifying. It bypassed her intellect and struck directly at the buried, wounded animal inside her that just wanted to stand up. "What is that?" she asked, her voice dropping to a whisper, nodding at the wood. "It's a fulcrum," Tyson said. "I carved it out of white oak. I want to put it under your thigh, right at the crease of the seat bucket, and adjust your footrest down 2 inches. You want to modify my chair? I want to change the angle of your chassis. If you break this chair, I will ruin you. I will take everything you have," she threatened. But there was no venom in it, just fear. "I don't have anything left to take, lady," Tyson said softly. "Lift your legs." Vanessa swallowed hard. She reached down, hooking her hands under her right knee. The fabric of her trousers was smooth. She hoisted her heavy, lifeless leg upward. Tyson knelt beside her. He smelled like fresh wood shavings. He slid the wooden wedge under the thick foam cushion of the seat, right at the edge where her hamstrings met her glutes. Then he pulled a wrench from his pocket. He reached down to the titanium footplate. Clank. Squeak. He loosened the bolts, dropped the plate exactly 2 inches, and tightened it back up. "Put it down," he commanded. Vanessa lowered her right leg. Her foot rested on the lowered plate. The wedge underneath the cushion forced her thigh upward, tilting her right hip forward. Instantly, her posture broke. She couldn't lean back comfortably anymore. She was forced to sit up straighter, her weight pitched slightly forward over her knees. "It's uncomfortable," she said, panic rising. "My back is arching." "Good. Now take a deep breath." Vanessa inhaled, the air in the room the thin. "Lean forward," Tyson instructed, his eyes locked on her knee, "and try to push your heel into the floor." "I can't." "Don't tell me you can't," Tyson barked, his voice snapping like a whip. "You run a billion-dollar company. You crush people for breakfast. Stop whining and push your damn heel down." Anger flashed hot in her chest. How dare he? How absolute dare he speak to her like that? She grabbed the armrests, her knuckles turning white. She leaned forward, throwing her weight over her knees, her eyes burning with furious tears. She visualized her heel. She visualized the titanium plate. She screamed at her dead nerves, projecting all her rage, her isolation, her 20 years of hollow power down into her spine. Push. Underneath the cushion, the wooden wedge acted as a pivot. The forward lean stretched her shortened hip flexors. The sciatic nerve, pinched for 2 decades against a calcified block of scar tissue, shifted by a fraction of a millimeter. A sensation exploded in Vanessa's right leg. It wasn't movement. It was pain. Pure, unadulterated, blinding agony. It felt like someone had driven a white-hot railroad spike into her calf and poured boiling water down her shin. It was 1,000,000 pins and needles, amplified by 1,000. Vanessa shrieked. It was a raw, animal sound that tore through the sterile silence of the office. She grabbed her thigh, her nails digging into the wool, tearing through the fabric, searching for the source of the fire. "Make it stop," she screamed, thrashing her upper body backward, trying to escape the wedge. "Make it stop. It burns. Oh God, it burns." Tyson didn't pull the wedge out. He lunged forward, grabbing her knees to keep her from throwing herself out of the chair. His heavy hands clamped down over her frantic fingers. "Feel it," he yelled over her screaming. "Vanessa, feel it." "It hurts," she sobbed, her pristine, controlled facade shattering completely. Tears streamed down her face, ruining her makeup, dripping onto her silk blouse. She wasn't a CEO anymore. She was a terrified 25-year-old girl, trapped in a crushed car on an icy interstate. "Pain is a signal," Tyson shouted, his face inches from hers, his eyes wild with a frantic, triumphant light. "Dead wires don't burn, Vanessa. Dead wires don't feel fire. The circuit is live." Vanessa collapsed forward, her forehead resting against Tyson's shoulder, sobbing uncontrollably. The burning in her leg was excruciating, a violent electrical storm raging beneath her skin. She gripped his coarse coveralls, burying her face in the smell of sawdust and sweat. Beneath her hand, beneath the torn wool of her trousers, a muscle in her right thigh was spasming wildly, fighting its way back to life. She wasn't paralyzed. She was just trapped. And the janitor had found the key. Tuesday mornings tasted like copper and bile. Down in sub-basement C, a windowless concrete bunker originally designed for the building's boiler systems, the air was thick with the scent of hot dust, ozone, and dried sweat. Vanessa hated this room. She hated the flickering fluorescent tube light overhead that buzzed like a dying wasp. Mostly, she hated the yellow nylon toe straps hanging from the exposed steel I-beams. Tyson had built a crude, brutalist gymnasium out of salvaged maintenance equipment. He didn't trust the pristine, chrome-plated physical therapy clinics uptown. He told her those places were built to make rich people feel comfortable while they failed. Sub-Basement C was built for work. Again, Tyson commanded. His voice echoed off the concrete walls, flat and devoid of pity. Vanessa gripped the heavy canvas loops of the toe straps. Her knuckles were white, the skin over her joints split and bleeding. She lay on a thick, dense rubber mat, the kind used to line the floors of auto body shops. She closed her eyes, squeezing them shut until white bursts of static bloomed in her vision. She focused every ounce of her formidable will into her left thigh. Fire. A jagged, tearing sensation ripped through her hamstring. The scar tissue, calcified and stiffened by 20 years of atrophy, fought back with agonizing resistance. It felt like rusted gears grinding together without grease. With a guttural, ugly grunt, she pulled her left knee upward. It moved exactly 2 inches. "Hold it," Tyson barked. He knelt beside her mat, smelling of WD-40 and bitter black coffee. He wasn't looking at her face, contorted in pain, or the expensive silk blouse entirely ruined by dark patches of sweat. He was watching the alignment of her patella. "You're compensating with your hip flexor. Isolate the quad. Drop the hip." "I can't," she gasped, her voice cracking. "Drop the hip, Vanessa." "It's going to tear," she screamed, dropping her head back against the rubber mat, panting heavily. The 2 inches of elevation vanished as her leg collapsed back to the floor with a heavy, dead thump. Tears of pure frustration pricked her eyes. For 6 months, this had been her life. By day, she ran a global logistics empire from her 64th floor office, masking the exhaustion behind a veneer of ruthless corporate aggression. By night, she descended into the concrete bowels of the building to be tortured by a janitor who treated her body like a seized engine block. She had tried to fire him twice. She had tried to pay him $1 million to walk away. Tyson had torn the check in half and told her to get back on the mat. He didn't want a payout. He wanted his hourly wage, and he wanted to fix the machine. "You're rushing," Tyson said, standing up. He wiped his greasy hands on his faded blue coveralls. "You're trying to force it. The nerves are firing, but the muscles are basically newborn. You can't put a V8 engine inside a rusted chassis and expect it to hold together." "I am not a car, Tyson," Vanessa snapped, pushing herself up onto her elbows. Her hair, usually a perfect blonde helmet, hung in damp, ragged strings across her face. "I am a 50-year-old woman with a broken spine, and I have been laying on this filthy floor for half a year." From the corner of the room, a sharp, rhythmic scraping sound paused. Lane sat on an overturned drywall bucket. He had a thick block of drawing paper balanced on his knees and a piece of black charcoal in his small, perpetually dirty hand. He watched Vanessa with large, unblinking eyes. He never spoke during these sessions. He just observed, a silent witness to the Ice Queen's nightly humiliations. Vanessa caught the boy's stare. A sharp pang of guilt pierced through her anger. She swallowed hard, forcing her breathing to slow. She hated that this child saw her like this, weak, shaking, prone on the floor. "I'm tired," she said, her voice dropping to a harsh whisper. "The burning never stops. Even when I'm sleeping, my legs feel like they're packed in dry ice." Tyson walked over to a rusted metal shelving unit. He grabbed a lukewarm bottle of water and tossed it onto her chest. "Nerve regeneration hurts," Tyson said bluntly. "Dead things don't hurt. You wanted to feel your legs. This is what feeling costs." He wasn't being cruel. That was the infuriating thing about Tyson Fletcher. He lacked the capacity for malice, but he equally lacked the capacity for coddling. To him, this was simple mathematics. Action, reaction, friction, heat. "Let's try the resistance bands," Tyson said, pulling a thick loop of black rubber from his tool bag. He approached her, kneeling to slip the heavy band around her ankles. His hands were rough, the calluses scraping against her skin, but his movements were remarkably precise. "Why are you doing this?" Vanessa asked suddenly. The question had burned in her throat for months. She watched his scarred fingers loop the thick rubber. "You don't like me. I've been nothing but awful to you. Why do you care if I walk?" Tyson paused. He kept his eyes on the knot he was tying. "My wife," he said. The words were low, carrying the heavy texture of old grief. "She got sick, pneumonia, fluid in her lungs. The doctors at the hospital, they looked at her charts, not at her. They looked at the monitors. They said there was nothing to do but wait for the antibiotics to work. They waited. She drowned." He pulled the knot tight, testing the tension of the rubber band. "I spent my whole life fixing things," Tyson continued, finally looking up. His eyes were a pale, washed-out blue, striking against the grease and shadows of the bunker. "When I saw you leaning in that chair, I saw the mechanics of it. I saw the pinch. I couldn't walk away from a mechanical failure. Not again." He stood up, grabbing the other end of the resistance band and wrapping it around his own waist, anchoring himself to the concrete floor. "Now," Tyson said, his voice hardening back into the foreman's bark, "pull your right knee to your chest, and don't stop pulling until I tell you." Vanessa stared at him. The sheer, immovable weight of the man anchored her. She dug her fingers into the rubber mat, braced her shoulders, and closed her eyes. She pulled. The fire ignited. But this time, she didn't scream. Gravity is a ruthless debt collector. It never forgets what you owe it. For 2 decades, Vanessa had been exempt from its downward crush. Her chair had carried the burden, cradling her bones, absorbing the earth's constant, heavy pull. Now, standing at the edge of the parallel bars in sub-basement C, the debt was due. 14 months had passed since the night Tyson first slipped the wooden wedge beneath her thigh. The custom titanium wheelchair sat in the corner of the concrete room, acting as an incredibly expensive coat rack for Tyson's flannel shirts. The parallel bars were crude. Tyson had welded them together from heavy-gauge industrial piping salvaged from a demolished cooling tower. The metal was cold, smelling of raw iron and flux. Vanessa gripped the pipes. Her knuckles stood out, sharp and white under the harsh fluorescent light. She wore thick sweatpants and heavy, flat-soled sneakers. Inside the shoes, her feet throbbed. The sensation of the concrete floor pressing against her soles was overwhelming. It was too loud, too intense. Every microscopic ridge in the rubber mat transmitted a shockwave of raw data up her newly awakened spinal column. "Breathe," Tyson said. He stood directly in front of her, his hands hovering an inch from her shoulders, ready to catch her. "I am breathing," Vanessa hissed through clenched teeth. "You're hyperventilating. Look at my chest. Match my rhythm." She forced her eyes up. The vertigo was sickening. Being 5'9" off the ground felt like standing on the edge of a skyscraper. The room swayed. Her blood pressure, unaccustomed to the vertical demand, plummeted. A cold sweat broke out across her forehead, and her stomach lurched violently. "I'm going to be sick," she choked out, her knees trembling. "No, you're not," Tyson said steadily. "Your brain is panicking because the telemetry is new. Lock your knees, push your heels down." She squeezed her eyes shut. She focused on the connection points, palms on iron, heels on rubber. Slowly, the nausea crested and began to recede. The violent shaking in her thighs settled into a deep, agonizing ache. The muscles were burning, desperately trying to stabilize joints that hadn't borne weight since the Clinton administration. "Okay," Tyson said, his voice dropping an octave, softening just a fraction. "Now, shift your weight to your left." Vanessa's eyes snapped open. Panic seized her throat. "No, I can't. If I move, I'll fall." "You won't fall. I'm right here." "I can't do it, Tyson." From the corner of the room, a small voice broke the heavy silence. "You did the rubber bands yesterday." Vanessa glanced over. Lane was standing by his bucket, holding a half-eaten apple. He wasn't drawing. He was watching her with total, unshakable confidence. She looked back at Tyson. The janitor gave a single, slow nod. Vanessa took a jagged breath. She tightened her grip on the iron pipes. Slowly, agonizingly, she shifted her hips to the left. The pressure on her left femur was immense. It felt as though the bone might shatter under the strain, but it held. "Good," Tyson said. "Now, lift the right foot, just an inch, slide it forward." Her brain sent the command. For a terrifying second, there was a delay, a lag in the biological software. Then the newly forged neural pathways sparked. Her right foot scraped across the rubber mat, a microscopic, shuffling inch. But it moved. She planted it. "Now the left," Tyson commanded. She shifted her weight back to the right. The shift was clumsier this time. Her hip sagged and her knee buckled slightly. Tyson's large, scarred hand shot out, gripping her bicep, holding her upright until she stabilized. He didn't pull her up. He just provided a fulcrum. "I've got you," he muttered. "Push." She pushed. The left foot dragged forward, the heavy rubber sole squeaking against the mat. One step, two steps. It was ugly. It was an awkward, Frankenstein-like shuffle, completely devoid of grace. Sweat stung her eyes, and her lungs burned as if she was sprinting up a mountainside. The pain in her lower back was a dull roar, the fused rods protesting the unnatural movement. But she was walking. She reached the end of the 10-foot iron pipes. She stopped, her chest heaving, her entire body shaking with exhaustion. She leaned heavily against the bars, gasping for air. Tyson stepped back. He crossed his arms over his chest, his faded blue coveralls stained with grease. A slow, exhausted smile touched the corners of his mouth. "Jassy is holding," he said quietly. Vanessa looked down at her feet. They were planted squarely on the floor. She wasn't looking at the world from the seated, sunken perspective she had known for 20 years. She was looking at it from her own height. She turned her head, looking past Tyson, past the rusted shelves and the flickering lights, toward the heavy steel door of sub-basement C. Beyond that door was her empire. Beyond that door was a company of thousands of people who feared the Ice Queen in her titanium throne. She knew with absolute certainty that she would never sit in that chair again. She let go of the right bar. She wiped the sweat from her forehead with a trembling hand, smearing dirt across her cheek. She didn't care. She had never felt so powerful. She looked at the mechanic who had refused to let her stay broken. "Tyson," she rasped, her voice thick with emotion. I think I need a new office." Tyson picked up his heavy canvas tool bag. The wrenches inside clanked together, a sharp metallic symphony. "I'll get the mop," he said. "If this incredible journey of resilience, human connection, and defying the impossible moved you, please hit that big button. Share this story with anyone who needs a reminder that hope can be found in the most unexpected places. Don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss out on our raw, deeply emotional audio dramas. Your support keeps these powerful stories alive. Drop a comment below. What was your favorite moment?